Captain Midnight.
Alright, so I usually don't make videos like this, but I am traveling through Japan right now. I haven't been able to, script videos and stuff like I usually do, so I thought I'd try something else this week and see what you guys have to say about a topic that I often cover here, which is streaming services. I've made tons of videos on Disney+, Netflix, HBO Max, etc. I guess now Max. And so I thought I would kind of give you guys the floor this time and see what you have to say and maybe respond to a couple of these. I have no idea how this is going to go, honestly, so let me know if you like it. If so, maybe I'll do some more videos like this. I was really inspired by Arlo, who has a great Nintendo channel, and of course Anthony Fantano, who does the hot take videos all the time. So I thought I'd try it out for myself, and yeah, if you guys like it, let me know. Maybe I'll do more videos like this. If not, hey, we can always forget this ever happened. And yeah, I guess we'll just get into your takes here. I put out a prompt here on YouTube and on Twitter, and I collected some responses to go over, and I think it should be pretty fun. I guess we'll see. And some of these I will be editing down a little bit just for time and clarity. So, @EvanDude says, I'm a Trekkie, so I have Paramount Plus. It is the worst paid streaming app I have used. I have to turn subtitles back on every time I use it. Even though I pay, I still see commercials for other Star Trek shows I've already watched, and half the time it changes my subtitles to German. Alright, so I have to say, this one I think is just dead on. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I do like about Paramount Plus. I'm also a Trekkie. I love having, Deep Space Nine, all the new shows. I mean, some of the new shows not so great, but I do like having it, for the most part, all there. I feel like usually they're missing some movies. The J.J. Abrams movies sometimes float around. But generally, it's a great place if you're a big Star Trek fan. I just hate using the app so much. Maybe it's kind of specific to the Xbox version of the app. I don't know. I'm guessing from this person's comment that it's a little more widespread than that. But I actually had to cancel Paramount Plus and redo it through Amazon just because I hated using that app so much. Which is too bad. I don't know how they can sink this much money into an app and have it just work this poorly. But yeah, that's also been my experience. Paramount Plus has a decent back catalog, but I think this is the biggest thing holding them back is just how unpleasant it is to use. For me, it is the worst one to just navigate, which is saying a lot because I know a lot of them aren't great with UI stuff. So yeah, I agree, Evan Dude. It is bad. Jim Jelly says, Peacock isn't a bad streaming service. It just needs to be marketed a little bit more for it to be as popular as the others. Okay, so here's what I'll say for Peacock. I think especially in terms of sitcoms and comedies, it's actually much stronger than it's often given credit for. I really like originals like AP Bio, which, didn't start on Peacock, but it ran there for years. And I think overall, Peacock is also the lowest price. I think this is correct. It is the cheapest option of all of these. Obviously not the fast, free services, but of the big apps. It has a pretty solid library that it feels like doesn't get much credit because a lot of that library is older network shows, and I know a lot of people that's just not that interesting to them, whereas to me, I like a lot of that stuff. And it's great to have Battlestar Galactica there and so many other old classic TV shows. So yeah, I don't know if it was just marketed more, it would be as popular as the others. Honestly, I see a lot of marketing for Peacock. Now granted, I feel like everyone's kind of in their own bubble in terms of what they see with marketing because of the internet, blah, blah, blah. But I do think a show like Poker Face was pretty heavily marketed. But Peacock itself just has such an uphill battle when it comes to branding because unlike, Netflix or Amazon Prime or, even HBO Max before it turned to Max, I feel like the general public just doesn't really have a good sense of what Peacock is. Peacock, obviously, they picked that name because of its connection to the NBC Peacock, which is a little too inside baseball, I think, for a major streaming brand. The NBC Peacock is, of course, famous to TV people like me who have been watching NBC for years. I don't know if, most people know what that is. It's also, like a lot of these services, I think it's only available in the US, which I know I'm really bad at addressing just in general. I feel like I make too many videos that are maybe too US specific when it comes to streaming. But yeah, I agree Peacock isn't a bad streaming service, especially at the price point it's at with the fairly strong back catalog. I think it's solid. Now, there is a lot of stuff that Peacock could do to improve. I feel like Poker Face is hopefully kind of turning over a new leaf in terms of their dramas. They have some pretty strong comedies, like American Auto is solid, and that's really flying under the radar. But in terms of dramas, I feel like Peacock is where dramas go to just never be heard of again. They have so many shows, like fairly big budget dramas, with even some like pretty well-known brands like the Da Vinci Code and stuff that just go on there and no one talks about them. They are just never heard from again. And yeah, I think especially now as all these streaming services are tightening their belts, that's gonna have to change. I mean, I don't know what Peacock can do to get on people's radar more. You know, everyone's chasing that like Game of Thrones massive hit. I think it's really hard to launch that type of hit when no one knows what the service itself is. And maybe that goes back to your point of it just needs to be marketed more, but I think the branding was pretty bad from the start. I think if they rebranded to really emphasize the Universal part of their name, which everyone knows what Universal is to some extent, at least far more than Peacock, that could help them. But yeah, I don't know. There's only so much room in a streaming service game, and I feel like Peacock might be one of the first ones to fall. Of all the major ones, Peacock is maybe the most likely to not be around in 5 years. At Jack Wilmack says, Apple TV is the worst. It's got nothing besides Ted Lasso and Severance. Netflix is still the best for now. Okay, this one, I gotta disagree on both these takes. Both of these, thumbs down from me. I feel like Apple TV, if there's one like really solid criticism of it, it's that it does not have the back catalog that a lot of these other streamers have. It just doesn't. You know, Apple is obviously not like a legacy entertainment brand. That's not the world that it comes from, and so it just doesn't have the back catalog that a Max has or something. But in terms of its originals, I think you're not giving it enough credit. You know, Ted Lasso, I was actually never that into Ted Lasso, honestly, especially as the show went on. I feel like it took on a lot more dramatic weight than its very silly premise could support. I don't know. Also, I just honestly never found it all that funny. Severance is maybe one of the best streaming shows to come out of the last 10 years, period, which I know it's probably too early to declare that. Like, it's only one season, especially in the streaming age. There's a lot of great shows that come out, and just season 2 is a complete bust, and it becomes clear that they only really had enough material for one season. I don't think Severance will be that show. I think there's at least 3 to 4 seasons of material there. I guess we'll see. But Severance season 1, I just think was such a well-written and tightly packaged little show. So many shows have tried to do the whole, you know, J.J. Abrams mystery box type of thing in a post-Lost world, and I feel like Severance pulls it off better than 99% of those shows. There's a real emotional connection to all the mysteries. It's not just like this lore and mystery for the mystery's sake. The characters were just really, really well developed. But even beyond Severance, and I guess Ted Lasso, since everyone loves that show for some reason, there's also, you know, Mythic Quest, which I didn't think had the greatest season last year, but overall I think it's a really strong sitcom. I love the standalone episodes they do every year. That one set in the 70s from season 2 was just fantastic. One of my favorite episodes of TV that year. I don't know how much longer it can run. I feel like this season was kind of spinning its wheels a little bit, but Mythic Quest is really strong. For All Mankind, I think, is a really, really interesting show, and definitely flying under the radar too much for a lot of people. If you like sci-fi storytelling at all, you should probably check out For All Mankind. I know critics didn't like it. I personally wasn't a huge fan of, but I randomly know a lot of fans of the Jason Momoa show C, which was a very goofy show that I feel like if it was put on a bigger platform, a lot more people would be talking about. I will say Foundation was kind of a miss though. Overall, I think Apple TV is becoming one of the more consistent, like in terms of making like just quality stuff. I haven't even gotten into some of the animated stuff they've done, which is actually really strong. I think Apple TV creatively is in a pretty interesting place. They're consistently turning out interesting stuff, which I respect. In terms of back catalog, this is not based on anything, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Apple acquire a NBC Universal or a Paramount Plus. I feel like eventually they're just going to absorb one of these struggling studios because they're Apple and they can do that, and it would give them a massive back catalog that they're lacking right now. In terms of your second point, which I feel like is the hotter take of these, Netflix is still the best. I disagree with this completely. Netflix will still have stuff like I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson, which had its third season come out recently, and I really love that. But overall, yeah, Netflix just doesn't do much for me these days. They have so many shows coming out on like such a frequent basis. Most of them you just know aren't going to actually finish their highly serialized story they're telling. I mean, I've gone over this in videos before. I don't like the Netflix model very much. I don't think it makes for great television. I think they throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And I don't know. I think a lot of Netflix shows, to me, and this is just me, feel designed to like be half watched while you're on your phone. There's a lack of ambition to a lot of Netflix shows that I find a little depressing. Though I will say one of Netflix's strengths, I guess, is just the sheer volume of shows, and not just shows originals, but shows they acquire as well. They're a great place to find new Korean shows you maybe haven't seen before, shows from Brazil, stuff like that. So I think there's still a lot of value there. But yeah, I could just never call Netflix the best. I know some people just like swear by their UI and all that. No thanks. Somewhat related to that, Daft Bana says, binge model is dead and it's better for it. Whenever I bring this up, people are really split on it. Some people get really mad at me. I've noticed that people who like grew up on the binge model and who love the Netflix binge model, they get really defensive about it, which, I kind of understand. I think it's, this idea that, oh, you can just watch it all right when it comes out. I understand why that's attractive to people, totally. I think there are some shows, the ones that are structured a lot like movies, where it works pretty well. And I think there's a place for it in the, TV landscape. I will say, I think it is just undeniably true that it burns through a show's relevancy really quickly. Now, that may not matter to you as a viewer, and that's completely valid, but it does matter to, the show getting to continue on and produce new seasons. A well-liked HBO show like Succession or, House of the Dragon or something, they'll have this like conversation, this building conversation around them every week where it feels like the season is really leading up somewhere, and you have a week to really sit with it and digest each episode. Especially for people who talk about television online, I feel like it's just a much more satisfying way to watch TV that the old model of, every week there's a new episode. The binge model, I feel like what's dangerous about it is the types of shows that are the most bingeable are also the types of shows that are most likely to be really disappointing if they're canceled early because they're purely serialized. If they don't have a real ending, that's deeply disappointing. And I feel like the binge model just leads more shows to getting canceled. I think that a show will come out, it'll have its week or two in the spotlight, maybe if it's lucky, and then it's just gone from the conversation. Shows on the weekly model, that's less likely to happen if they catch on at all. So I think the binge model is dangerous for shows. I understand why some people really like it, and I think that's fine, but I do think it's maybe bad for shows overall, and I do kind of think that it should be used sparingly. For big events, I know it worked well for something like Wednesday, shows with a lot of memeable moments or something that can live on TikTok and these other places. I understand why that could work, but I think overall it's just not the best way to build a long-running show. I think the binge model at the end of the day is maybe better for things like miniseries. Riley Kylo says, the worst thing about Netflix is the fact that 5 seconds after every video, it puts you into the next one. I just watched a 3-hour-long film, and then a big sign appears saying, hey, we're gonna start an episode of That 70s Show if you don't grab the controller in the next 5 seconds. And instead of marinating in a great film, I'm mad. It also really takes away from the fact that credits are part of the film. Yeah, I totally agree with this. I think that sucks. I get why it's like, you know, if you're watching like Community or something, just, oh, you don't have to get up, it just starts the next episode. I guess that works. A lot of people prefer that. I hate it. I want control over what I'm watching. I don't want to have to lunge at the controller right when something ends. Netflix's UI in general, I know some people really like it, and in terms of how it's set up, it is miles ahead of a lot of the other ones, but I hate how noisy it is. It never wants to just let you sit and look through things. It starts things immediately. Every show that you go over just like blasts in your face after staying on it for 2 seconds. Just the experience of being on Netflix is so noisy, and it's really hard to disable the autoplay stuff. Yeah, I mostly agree with this. Like, sometimes it is useful, you know, if you just have like some sitcom on in the background or something, it just autoplays the next one. I get why people like that. Especially if you're watching a movie though, don't just start something random after it. No one wants that. No one is like, oh yeah, I just, you know, finished up Goodfellas. I think I really want it to play an episode of Community after that. Well, Community did have a Goodfellas episode, so maybe I'd be wrong there. But don't just start playing something because you want to pad the stats. It's just, yeah, it's an unpleasant part of the Netflix experience. And I think generally just the experience of being on Netflix is so much worse than it used to be because it's just blaring stuff at you constantly. I know you can technically go into like your account and turn this off, but they make it really annoying to do that. Yeah, I've never liked that. I just let me click on a button that says watch preview, but obviously Netflix is obsessed with metrics and wants to get as many eyeballs on every single thing that they can, and probably to inflate their numbers, like, honestly. And yeah, it's an unpleasant experience. I know some people love the Netflix UI, and in a lot of ways it has big advantages over the other ones, but that's just unpleasant. I don't like it. At Marcel the Tuine says, my hot take is Canopy is the best streaming service. So Canopy, for those who don't know, is a really well curated streaming service that picks interesting movies. I think services like that, Canopy, Criterion, Shudder for horror, you know, that you can go down the list, are kind of in a separate category than like the Maxes or the Netflixes of the world that are trying to be everything for everyone. Having a well curated streaming service is really great, and those services obviously won't appeal to everyone just by the nature of what they're doing, but I'm glad they're around. They make the world a little bit better just by not feeling like, oh, here's another bucket of slop. Like, they're things that some human picked out for you to watch, and I really appreciate that. The Mix29 says, I think Hulu is really underrated. They usually are the first ones to be able to stream new indie films that don't stay in theaters very long, have great original shows from FX like The Bear, Legion, and Atlanta, and have a great mix of modern and classic anime. It's everything I want from a service. Yeah, so I've had a Hulu account since Hulu has existed. I have always been on the Hulu train. These days, Hulu's biggest asset is definitely, at least to me, I'm not the biggest anime guy in the world, so this may differ for other people, but for me, it's definitely the FX connection. Like this person was mentioning, you know, just the ability to go back and watch The Shield, Justified, all their new stuff. I think Hulu at this point is really being held up by FX. Now, Hulu used to just have a much broader selection, I feel like, ever since Disney acquired them. It's become clear that Hulu's last days are kind of upon it. It's going to get folded into Disney Plus soon. Hulu was already kind of a US thing that now exists as just Disney Plus in other countries that aren't the US, and I feel like these are the dying days of Hulu, which, you know, is a little bittersweet, especially since I use Hulu a lot more than I use Disney Plus. But I think there's a lot to recommend about Hulu. I do think it's gotten a little overpriced these days, but Hulu has a lot of solid movies on it. Hulu has a great back catalog, even if it's been stripped down pretty significantly. And yeah, I'm gonna miss it. I mean, I guess it'll still kind of be there as Disney Plus, but it won't be the same. Confuddle Leg says, the ability to just pay for individual episodes on places like YouTube or iTunes will eventually overtake actual monthly streaming services as the streamers have less to offer. I think this is an interesting idea, but I don't see it happening. For one thing, I feel like the streamers in the last 10 years have created this ecosystem where a lot of people now just find the idea of paying for one individual show or movie to be baffling, and they won't do it. it. Back in the day, obviously you would just rent a movie, you would just buy the DVD, whatever. It's depressing to think about as someone who, still really loves physical media, who is a little scared by how much the streamers will just rip stuff off their service and it'll just kind of disappear into the ether. But from what I've seen, I'm just worried that people aren't willing to do that anymore. They're not willing to shell out some money for one show that they really love. Like, I had friends who loved Better Call Saul and, didn't have AMC, and they would just wait forever for it to go up on Netflix, when the option to just buy the whole season or something as it came out was just sitting there the whole time. But doing that just didn't even occur to them. It's like that wasn't even an option on the table. Now, obviously, that's really anecdotal, but yeah, I just don't see us going back to this okay, just pay for one show type of model. Hopefully I'm wrong. I would kind of be okay with that, especially if we could bring back some of the DVD type of special features. I really miss audio commentaries. I really miss bonus stuff like that, some insight into how the show or movie was made. I really miss that stuff, and if we could buy things individually, I feel like some of that would come back. I also think that iTunes in general, especially iTunes, it's on its way out, Even the name iTunes just feels incredibly dated now. As a place to purchase music, I just feel, streaming services have also taken over music. It's just, I don't think iTunes will exist in its present state, 10 years from now. And I don't think people come to YouTube for, traditionally produced shows or movies. I think YouTube tried that with the YouTube Red and its YouTube Premium shows, and they even created Cobra Kai, which started on YouTube, and they couldn't get it going. It had to go to Netflix for it to become a big hit. I don't know if that's what most consumers are looking for from YouTube. And iTunes just feels like it's in its later days. Now, I'm no Apple expert. Maybe Apple fans will come in here and really correct me and say iTunes is way more relevant than ever, but yeah, no, I don't see it. At Minidonna4 says, rebranding HBO Max to just Max makes sense and saves the HBO branding from being diluted to meaninglessness. So I don't think this is a bad take, honestly. The HBO Max to Max rollout obviously didn't go as well as it could. I think that just taking the HBO out of its name does make some sense. I do think that it was kind of hurting the HBO brand, because I would see people online getting mad at HBO for, taking away animated shows off their platform. When HBO, the company producing Succession and House of the Dragon and, has done The Sopranos, The Wire, blah, 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 was not doing that. That was their corporate overlords doing that, but they were kind of implicated just because of that name. And I feel like that was really confusing a lot of people who, can't be expected to keep up with what all of these little subsections within this larger brand mean. And HBO in the past 25 years has done a lot of work to become associated with quality prestige television. It's what they do best. It's what they've done best for decades. And I do think it was kind of hurting the brand a little bit. So it wasn't the worst move in the world. I have no interest in most of the stuff that Max added, all the Discovery reality show stuff that just, Dr. Pimple Popper, all that kind of stuff. That holds zero appeal to me. I am not a reality show person kind of at all. The expansion didn't add much for me, but do I think it was probably a smart move in the long run? Yes. I totally agree it shouldn't have been blue, though. It's like every streaming service is well, Netflix is red, so we gotta be blue. There's more than two. There's more. I know you all want to pretend there's Netflix and then there's you, but that's just not the case. There's a lot of streaming services out there. Many of them are blue. Let's ditch the blue. Jacob says, getting into streaming was an extreme mistake for movie studios that greatly cheapen their products and will cause much less money to be made in the long run. I think Jacob may be onto something here in a lot of ways. I don't know how things will look in the long run, but I think if you read things like the recent Vulture article about the state of TV streaming, yeah, things are looking pretty grim right now. It seems like they kind of let Netflix, who had admittedly a really refreshing, cool model in, 2012, 2013, they kind of let Netflix steer the industry off a cliff in a way, which was maybe inevitable and was just how things were always going to go. I don't know, but it does really feel like they all chase this Netflix model, which, did feel like the future for sure, but also is far less profitable than what they were doing. And while that technological transition was always inevitable in some ways, I do feel like they kind of created a monster that they couldn't control. Alright, so those were some of your takes this week. I enjoyed this. I hope to do it again sometime. Let me know if you enjoyed it too down in the comments. We'll get that discussion going. I know I should be talking about The Flash next week. I'm not sure if I'll be able to. I'm still going to be traveling. I still haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. But yeah, this was fun. This was a fun experiment, and I'm looking forward to reading more of your thoughts down in the comments.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.